So the lesson 6 is about other market structures. We have been talking about competitive markets and the monopoly. Now we're going to talk about oligopoly. So the oligopoly is a small group of firms in a market with substantial barriers to entry by additional firms. In an oligopoly, firms can behave cooperatively or non-cooperatively. If they behave cooperatively, they can form a cartel. If they act non-cooperatively, they can move back towards the competitive outcome with lower profits. A market with two firms is called duopoly. So in oligopoly, the game theory is very important. Two key points of game theory are each firm will produce a strategy which which will be depend on what it thinks the other firms are going to do. And this set of strategies taken together will jointly determine the outcome. Game will end when the market is in equilibrium. So there are some very remarkable experience or some terminology in game theory. The first is the Nash equilibrium. Is one firm wants to change its strategy given what other firms are doing. Prisoner's dilemma, a simple example of game theory. We illustrate the problem with a pair of metrics. That means if both sides choose their dominated strategy, they fall into a worse payoff than cooperate of each other. Dominant strategy. The best thing to do no matter what the other guy does. The next part is Cournot model of non-cooperative equilibrium. The Cournot equilibrium is the set of quantities for each firm such that holding the quantity of all other firms constant, no firms can obtain a higher profit by choosing a different quantity. So it is all about quantity. You need to discuss this scenario based on quantity. Reactive curve. Relationship between firms' profit maximizing output and outputted things its competitor will produce. Cournot equilibrium is where the reaction curves intersect. Math to calculate the Cournot equilibrium. You need to calculate residual demand for a given firm. In other words, the demand for a firm's product, subtracting out other firms' output decisions, and create a total revenue function. From the total revenue function, derive marginal revenues. Solve its profit maximization. Profit problem is marginal revenue equals to marginal cost. This will give you a firm's best response function to other firms' output decisions. And then solve is a solution is a set of quantities, one for each firm, that solves this system of questions in four. You need to now explain the prisoner's dilemma, understand why cooperation can be sustained in a infinity repeated game, but not in a game with finite periods. Um, just like tit for tat strategy, we have talking about in game theory, and you need to now explain why cartels are unstable because trust is a big problem. And graphically, the math understanding what math you should know in oligopoly. find the Nash equilibrium off again, given a payoff matrix. Solve for quantities and prices when two firms compete in Carnot equilibrium, and solve the cartel equilibrium with and firms. Oligopoly continued. What is cartels? Cartels are fundamentally unstable, incentive to cheat, and raise on production, and because they are illegal. Antitrust laws makes the cartel hard to achieve and also illegal to achieve the cartels. Each member has an incentive to cheat on the cartel, and they can't get away with it because their additional production is fairly small relative to the total. If one firm cheats, it gets all the benefits of selling more quantities, but only a part of the position in fact, and that gets shared with all the other firms in the market. So in cartel, each firms have less incentives to cheat. Trust is the number one priority. How about many firms? Non-cooperative equilibrium leads to less output and more profits than does the competitive market case. Less output and more profits. Remember it. In terms of welfare, usually perfect competition because it's a market decision and it's greater than oligopoly and greater than monopoly. Quantities as an indicator of social welfare. That with loss in welfare analysis comes from traits that alternate. As the number of firms gets larger, the current Carnot equilibrium approaches perfect competition. As the number gets small, it approaches monopoly. So the Carnot equilibrium is all about quantities. How about price? Price competition. Bertrand equal competition. Firms set price instead of quantities at the same time. Two firms may be enough to remove market power if products are identical. To avoid Bertrand competition, firms can product differentiate. Identical Bertrand duopolistics drive price down to marginal cost, just like perfectly competitive market equilibrium. In other words, firms will set their price at marginal cost. So, but what? So, what's to know? Explain why cartels are unstable because of trust problem. They have incentives to cheat. Compare welfare from different forms of competition. The perfect competition greater than oligopoly and greater than monopolies. Know the difference between quantity and price. The quantity is Carnot, the price is Bertrand competition. Solve for the price and quantity when firms compete in the model of Bertrand and Bertrand price competition. Okay, that's about all the markets. We have taught the perfect competition, oligopoly, and monopoly. So the next part, which is lecture 7, I'm gonna to talking about labor markets. Thank you for listening. Bye bye.